Hi guys, Talisha from P3 here. Today we're going to be talking about some strategies that we can implement to try and combat information overload. Now, if you're a podiatry student, recent graduate, or you're a clinician that's just undertaken a massive form of knowledge consumption and we've headed into the real world and then realised that we still have this quite immense knowledge gap present, and then it's spurred you into this very rapid information consumption phase, and you're reaching a point where you're consuming all of this information but you're not actually able to retain any of it. It's what I refer to as the Dunning-Kruger hangover. So let's unpack this a little bit more, and then we'll run through some strategies on how to help overcome this and create more sustainable long-term learning behaviours. So what's inspired this video is last week I was on a coaching call with one of my coaching clients, and he's a recent graduate. He's in his second year of practice, so he's been practicing for a little over a year, and he's starting to reach this mental burnout phase. And so what's happened, and it happens to a lot of us, it happened to myself and it's happened multiple times, where basically we've either graduated university or we've done some postgraduate study, or it can even be a really intensive, say, weekend or week-long course that you've undertaken, and you've consumed all of this knowledge, and we finish the training or the study, and we're going, oh my God, I know I've learned so much, this is fantastic, I can apply this. But then once we get out of that learning setting back into reality in a clinical setting, we begin to apply this knowledge, it becomes apparent quite quickly that there's still probably these massive knowledge gaps that exist. And what that does is it spurs on this rapid surge in, okay, I've realized I don't know all of this information, so I need to catch up. And you just start consuming and consuming and consuming all of this information with the hope of sort of fast tracking and mastering and filling in this knowledge gap that you've identified. And what happens is, because we have access to so much information, which is a great thing, but it is a bit of a double-edged sword where it can start to work against us, where we're consuming all of this information, but it does reach this threshold where we're consuming, but then we're not actually able to retain any of it because we're not giving ourselves a chance to consume, consolidate, and apply, which is what we need to do for lifelong learning. So some of the signs that you may be experiencing that gives a little bit of a hint as to if you are experiencing a Dunning-Kruger hangover, or it doesn't have to be the Dunning-Kruger hangover, it can just be information overload, which basically it will come in the form of, yes, you're consuming all this information, but it's a bit of that sort of mental fatigue where you may be reading something, watching something, and then if you take pause a few minutes later or the next day, you stop and think and go, I haven't actually retained, or I can't really remember anything of what I just consumed. So that's a little bit of a sign there. Other signs that you may experience, and this is more what I find with some of the new and recent graduate coaching clients I work with, and I've experienced it myself as well, where you're becoming aware that, yes, I have this knowledge gap that exists and I really want to get on top of it. And we start to create a lot of this internal pressure on ourselves that we need to learn it all yesterday. That can begin to manifest itself in the form of a bit of imposter syndrome. What am I doing here? I don't know what I'm doing. And you're sort of starting to panic and really doubt yourself. But you have to remember that at the bare minimum, you have completed at least 3 to 4, even 5 or 6 years of university study. So that's a kudos into itself, because that's a lot of information that is crammed into your brain in 4 years. And you do leave, if you stop and reflect, when you graduate compared to day one at university, I still remember how daft I felt. You have learned a huge amount, and you can continue to do this. So that one of the first things to do is just be a little bit kind to yourself. And stop and reflect with how far you've already come, because I think that's one thing that all of us can be quite guilty of. We sort of can focus in on our shortcomings or where we may have gaps, but we forget how far, yes, we've come, and then what we've already achieved. So be kind to yourself. That's probably my first tip. And then moving into some other tips and, well, I wouldn't say tips and tricks, but tips and strategies on how we can move from this rapid overdose of information and peter out into a more sustainable long-term learning behaviours and strategies. Okay, so the first strategy that we can look to implement is more of a mindset shift, and this is very applicable to new and recent graduates because we're committing ourselves to lifelong learning. So it's a very different environment to when you're studying. So when we're studying at university and we're going semester to semester, we enter into this new subject that we may not have any idea about. So we're consuming a vast amount of information, and then we need to do that quite rapidly, get this assignment out, we get to our end of semester exams. So there's a huge amount that we're doing. And that approach that's university life, right? But when we come into career mode, that's not sort of how we create sustainable learning environments, and that's how we end up with this Dunning-Kruger hangover. So the mindset shift is realizing that we're not cramming for an exam that we forgot to study for, and we don't need to learn everything yesterday. We're committing to lifelong learning, so it's more of a marathon as opposed to a sprint. So we need to put strategies in place and just slow things down so we can actually consume the information, consolidate the information, and then apply the information, and we just continue to build on that. And it's very similar in a rehabilitation setting. If we try and do too much too soon, we try and fast track the process, we can actually sell ourselves short long term because we're not giving ourselves time to actually learn, adapt, and develop that level of mastery. So slowing down and just getting that mindset shift as far as, like I said, slowing down, creating a more sustainable pace of learning to actually allow it to sink in and for you to be able to apply it. And then the second strategy, which is a 4-step process, this is where we cut out the noise and we begin to consume with intent. And when I'm saying consume with intent, take pause first, and we need to identify our what, why, when, and how when it comes to learning. So step 1 is identifying your learning goals. What are you wanting to learn? Why are you wanting to learn it? And what is going to be the overall outcome of you consuming and applying this knowledge or acquiring this skill? Step 2 is setting aside time to complete the activity. So this is identifying our when. So everyone is different, so there's no right or wrong answer with how you structure your learning patterns or learning behaviors. So with this is identifying, do you have the time and capacity to consume this information weekly? Is it fortnightly? Is it monthly? So identifying, yes, what you want to learn, why you want to learn it, and then when are you actually going to set aside this intended time where you can put this into practice. And then it's not just about the time to consume, you also need to give yourself time to apply the knowledge. So it's one thing to, okay, go, all right, I'm going to read one journal article a week, but then the next step is you need to give yourself time to actually apply and consolidate that information, because there's no point reading this, and then, okay, I haven't actually given myself time to apply or test the waters with any of it. And it's very similar to when people cram a huge amount of weekend courses in throughout the course of a year. So they may be doing all of these courses that are highly clinically relevant to them, and on their own they probably pose a pretty great benefit. But if you do this weekend course but then you're rushing off to the next one and then the next one, and you're not actually giving yourself time to figure out how it works with how you treat and then how it's going to work in your clinical setting, it's a little bit of an exercise in futility. So that's one of the other factors when we're identifying our when. Another thing that we have to consider in the when is how long is our attention span. So some people can sit down on a regular basis and consume 3 hours worth of information and retain it, and then if they give themselves enough time, consolidate and then apply. For other people, and I fluctuate between the two, but for other people, their attention span may literally only be 20 minutes. So if you're one of those people, there's no point setting aside a 3-hour block where you're going to sit down and try and consume information when realistically you're only receptive to that for the first 20 minutes. So again, getting a little bit real with yourself and identifying how you learn and what time of day you learn best and everything like that. So again, I can't tell you exactly what to do. it's a little bit of a self-reflection exercise that you need to do to build this strategy for this lifelong learning that you're going to be undertaking. And then step 3 is identifying how and where you're going to be consuming and obtaining this information. And again, there's no right or wrong answer here. Some people, they enjoy just reading journal articles and summarizing, and they learn quite well from that. Other people don't. Other people may learn better from, it still needs to be evidence-based, in my opinion, but still needs to be evidence-based. But basically, other people may consume better from reading blogs or watching vlogs, or whatever works best for you. Even there's some really great even Instagram and social media platforms that they do have a huge amount of evidence-based information there for you to consume. There's infographics, there's short vlogs, so much of it. But basically identifying how you actually consume information that's the most efficient for you, and so, or quality for you. So when I'm talking about quality, one, of course, I'm pro-evidence-based, and you should be if you're a health practitioner. But so we want quality as far as evidence goes, but then also quality as far as what works for you. So this will be, do I engage with this type of learning, reading or listening or whatever it is? So identifying what you engage with and what you can actually retain the best. So what I do for myself personally is I consume from a few different mediums. So I read a ton of journal articles, but again, I have to identify the right time of day for me to be able to do that. But then I go for a lot of long runs. So there's a lot of podcasts and even like YouTube channels and things like that. So there's a lot of that information that I'll listen to on my runs. And I may listen to the same episode 4 or 5 times over the course of a week or two, because sometimes when I'm navigating traffic, I won't retain sort of those few minutes of the podcast. So I'll listen to them a few times, and over time, I eventually consolidate the information. So again, no right or wrong answer here. Bit of a self-reflection exercise again. Identify what learning mediums work best for you. And then the last thing that we have to do once we've identified our quality learning mediums is this is where we cut out the noise. And if you are someone that's been experiencing the information overload, I would suggest 3 sources or mediums of information at the absolute most. If you're someone that you're not experiencing information overload, but you're just trying to create a little bit more of a sustainable behavior or approach to long-term learning, can be maybe up to 5 learning mediums or learning sources, and then cut out the rest. So you've gone through and you've identified what you want to learn, what you're going to get out of learning this, when you're going to consume the knowledge, and then identify where it's going to come from. So pick your 3 favorites and then cut out the rest. And that doesn't mean that they have to be gone forever, because especially if it's the Dunning-Kruger hangover and this information overload, we're just trying to reorientate ourselves to shift from this cramming mode of knowledge consumption into this more sustainable, slow burn, long-term learning. So cutting out a lot of the noise, identify your 3 key ones, and then you'll just focus on implementing this process for those 3. And then it can cycle through. So if you've achieved what you wanted to from learning from that medium, or you're a little bit sick of consuming that information or that content, cycle it through. You can sub 1 or 2 out, get 2 or 3 new ones in, and that's just how we'll work through it. And it will change over time. Our interests change. You might have a few new clients that you see in the clinic that spur a little bit of interest. Like I've been focusing on plantar heel pain, but then I've had a lot of arthritic knees come in, so I want to focus on that for a little while. So yeah, you can sub in and out, but again, cutting out the noise, identifying your 3 key ones, 5 if you're not suffering the acute information overload, and then we move on to step 4, where we stop just consuming and we start producing. Now what this is it activates different areas of the brain, and there's a quote that I can't remember who says it, or said it. It's, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. And one of the best ways to consolidate learning and this knowledge consumption is for us to be able to explain it to someone else. And we want to practice as many mediums as possible. Like, there's some of my friends that they're probably sick of me at this point, but I'll explain things to death to them, and part of it so I can retain information, and then the other part is, at least in my mind, they enjoy some of the information I'm sharing with them. Now, there's so many different ways that you can do this. You can write your own summaries, you can practice verbally explaining it to someone, you can record a video, you can create a social media post, you can create an infographic. But what I would suggest is, for every new bit of information you consume, create something from that. And it also has these positive effects if you're someone that's trying to build your personal practitioner brand, or you're trying to build your clinic's brand. You're creating a huge amount of information and content there for you to pass on that knowledge to potential clients. So there's a bonus to this, but in the purpose that I'm talking about or referring to here is to commit that information to our long-term memory bank. So it enhances the learning process and, again, creates that more sustainable long-term learning and knowledge acquisition. So hopefully a few of the strategies I've explained today have given you some tools where you can potentially overcome this information overload or the Dunning-Kruger hangover that you may be experiencing. And if they have helped you, let me know. p3podiatry@gmail.com. I do read my emails. And if you're a podiatry student or recent graduate, at the Progressive Podiatry Project, we're all about trying to support you, create an environment where you feel included, and give you some tools and resources to create long-term fulfilling careers. So if you'd like more information in regards to this, head to progressivepodiatryproject.com/podstudent, and there's a few resources there for you. And that's it from me, Dunning-Kruger hangover in a nutshell, and I'll catch you next time.